Thank you very much for having me. I'm glad this worked out well, that I could do this today because I have to zip off first thing in the morning to Michigan. So thanks for doing this on a Monday. So hopefully a few of you made it to Cultivate. If not, I have some information for you that will hopefully be helpful to your pest management program. If you're wondering what's going on in this picture, nothing related to a greenhouse situation. But this is actually a scale insect I photographed on a tulip poplar down in Gatlinburg about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And that's a fungus that has actually killed the scale insect. And I just think it's really cool to find these things in nature. I was down in Gatlinburg because I was photographing fireflies, which you may or may not know. Fireflies are actually a biocontrol agent. The larva is predatory and lives in the soil and feeds on things like snails and slugs and other meats in the soil. And so they're super, super amazing insects. And so as soon as I got back from my trip, I had to start photographing the fireflies in my yard. And this is a photo of the front of my house with my fireflies. I'm not sure if we had an extremely high population this year, or it was the first year I really focused on how many I had, but it was pretty crazy, the number of fireflies. This is actually where I'm standing is about a 2-acre meadow. When we first moved in, it was just turf grass. And through the last 19 years, I've been plugging in native plants. Of course, we have some invasives out there. We're working on trying to get rid of those. But it's been really interesting to see the change in the ecology, and when I provide a habitat for beneficials, how many we can get. So just sharing that because I was super excited to get this photo on the fireflies. But first thing we're going to talk about is I just want to talk a little bit about what I've seen in the phone calls I've gotten this year. I like to call my time at home my COVID vacation. I did not ever have COVID, but because of travel restrictions and many facilities having their doors closed, as it should be, for visitors to come in, I was home for about 14 months not traveling, which for those of you that know me, I'm usually on a plane every week. So I worked on a lot of other projects like photography, working on my website, restoring candy equipment from the 1800s, you know, lots of other things. But people were still calling and messaging me all the time, and I'm on the phone every day with growers. And the main calls I've been getting this year, and actually my earliest calls were in February from Maine about thrips. And all the way back then, they were starting to have thrips issues. And it's been a pretty thrippy year. I think maybe part of the difference is I do work with medical cannabis and hemp, and they are still new to thrips and don't quite understand them. Also, they're most of the time dealing with other thrip species outside of Western flower. So we do have to look at that in their management. But for those that were early on a bio program, using predatory mites, using nematodes in the soil, using microbials, they were pretty much able to keep their thrips at a dull roar this year and keep them down. It's those that aren't so preventative that did end up with some issues. Also, having aphid issues. I mean, I think this is going to be a continuous battle, fighting aphids. Since many commercial growers cannot use the neonic pesticides, which have been used in the past to control aphids, trying to find new products to manage them that can be used in conjunction with your beneficials is important. One example of a product, it's not super new, but Vintegra is one that can, it really does a good job knocking back aphids and can be used in conjunction with most of your beneficials. So there are a few newish, and you know, that's been out a couple years now, so it's not super new, but there are products like that that can be used. The other thing, broad mites. Broad mites still have not really gone away. Still, one of the better programs we've been doing is knockdown with Suffoil X, and then coming in with predatory mites. And depending on where you are, the crop, your pest pressures, either using Cucumaris or Swarovski. New Guinea impatiens, they have continually been an issue, and I really think it's essential to start your new guineas as soon as you get them stuck on the predatory mites. There are concerns about what spray residue may come in on them, and some of your predatory mites may die or not want to go in the plants because of the pesticide residue on them from offshore production. But I think it's worth the risk to get those predatory mites out, because the risk from broad mites on those crops is really high. And the concern is the broad mite spreading from the new guineas to other plant material. And especially if you put your new guineas in hanging baskets and then hang them over your other seed crops, those broad mites can drop down and then infect other crops. And we've seen it on begonias, ivy, gerbera, daisies, taurina, sun patience. They can get into a lot of different crops. But again, as far as bios go, the Sulfoil X has been really good to knock them back. You do have to get spray coverage, and obviously you want to follow all the oil rules. But once that oil is dry, you can get right back in with predatory mites so they can finish off the job for you. But those are the main three that I've been contacted most about these years, but I do think they are manageable. You just have to be proactive. And on the thrips and aphids, get in there and see which species you have so you can really zero in on how to manage them. So we're going to talk about now kind of what's new. It's actually been a little exciting because we do have a handful of new things this year to talk about with Biocontrol. The first product is BioPearl, and this is a slow release nematode. The best way I can explain it is it's like Osmocote of nematodes. They are actually produced by Enema in Germany, but BioBee is the distributor in the United States. BioBee is actually an Israeli-based insectary, but again, they do have a partnership with Enema. And the idea is you have these tiny capsules that the nematodes are in, and then once you put them in the soil, the nematodes will slowly release. This is actually what the product looks like. To me, it looks like little tapioca balls. So for those of you that aren't familiar with nematodes, which I'm sure many of you are, we're predominantly using these to control western flower thrips and now onion thrips. They also are used to control fungus gnats, but there's a lot of focus on using these for thrips management. What's great is they can be a good part of an IPM program, even if you're not using other biocontrol agents. They're very compatible with most, not all, but most pesticides. If you're interested in compatibility information, BASF has an excellent compatibility sheet that will give you the nematodes species and then the pesticide they test them against to tell you if they're compatible or not. What's great about nematodes is we don't have to worry about fungus gnats and thrips pupa in the soil becoming resistant to them. So you can use them over and over again. So these slides here are actually from Enema that they provided me to explain the product a little better, because at first it was like, slow release nematodes. And so basically you have the nematodes inside that blue area in there, and then there's this soft hydrogel on the outside because they're actually kind of mushy when you get them. And they can put any species of nematode in there, but obviously Steinonema feltiae, which is what we use for fungus gnats and for western flower thrips and onion thrips, are the key. Those are the key pests we're going after. So most of the product you're going to see is feltiae for the U.S. market. They're real small. They're about 4 millimeters wide, and they wanted to make sure that there was not going to be any kind of environmental issues with these. And so basically they're made out of food grade items: the water, sunflower oil, salt, and emulsifier, and then sodium alginate. I asked them if there was going to be an OMRI listing on this. We're waiting to see about that. So what the idea is when you incorporate these into your media is that they'll slowly release nematodes over time, so that you get, instead of just getting that shot of nematodes up front and their numbers declining, you get a consistent slow release so that you can get better control over time. you know, there's this big question of how long are they going to last? I think there's a lot of variables involved, and the main one's going to be temperature. I think that trials need to be done in the US at different soil temperatures and different media types to see how long they're going to last, because I have concerns in the southern states where it gets really, really hot in the summer months, are if these are going to be able to still continue to release 42 days later in the soil. So, and you can see in this table, the red is the non-treated, and so you didn't have a lot of mortality. The blue is where you're drenched, and you can see you got high mortality at first, but then it drops off. And then the slow release nematodes higher, then it dips, but then it kind of comes up just a little bit, but it's still providing about 43% infection for their trial insects there, which they were testing mealworms in this situation. I'd like to, we're going to hopefully see it done with fungus gnats. So the idea of this is, again, it's the slow, low dose exposure so that you get a consistent release out of there. This is going to be good for people that don't have boom systems to apply nematodes, and where nematodes can be very challenging. And I like the idea of you can pre-incorporate the nematodes up front. Question's going to be economics. Is this going to be economical to do in certain crops? You know, you're going to have to look at labor costs. Will this save you labor? Again, if you pre-incorporate it up front, because you can't top dress with this. This is designed for incorporation and needs to be down in the media. I think there's a lot of potential here to sell actually to homeowners and hobbyist growers, because if you just have a cup of nematodes with these pearls in it, you could dibble little holes in your houseplant, put a spoon in, and cover the soil back up and let them go to work there, because it's very difficult for a homeowner to deal with a whole tray of nematodes. So I think there might be potential for a retail product here for retail garden centers. Another thing, okay, and this really isn't a product, but this is super cool that BioBee has developed. They basically made Pokemon cards for all the different biocontrol agents. So if you happen to catch them at a trade show, or if you happen to see a rep or contact them, you want to try to get some of these, because they give you information, their ideal temperatures, how to apply them, as their supplemental feeding. And like for the lacewing here, they're talking about using Artemia, which is a dead moth egg. In fact, I've got lacewing larvae in my kitchen in a cage right now. I'm feeding Artemia to get them up to size to take photos. So these cards are super cool. I lucked out early, got them super early, and I'm excited. I got a complete set, so I'm pretty happy about that. They're super cool. So not a new product, but super cool. So if you catch them at any shows this year, you got to hit them up for the cards. So spider mites. I've gotten a fair amount of spider mite inquiries this year. Obviously, most have been from hemp and medical cannabis, but also from some ornamental growers. There's some certain crops every year we consistently have spider mite problems on. And you guys all know that when their numbers get high, they can really get out of hand. Traditionally, we buy Persimmilus and we release it. Persimmilus is one of my favorite predatory mites. They grab spider mites and they feed like vampires, where they stick their mouth parts in and extract the fluids out. What's great about the predatory mites is they'll feed on all life stages of two spots, so that you can really help break that life cycle. So when we normally buy Persimmilus, we get a bottle. And if you look down the bottle hold, this is what you see. You have all these adult Persimmilus that are like, I'm super hungry, feed me now, we haven't had food. That's why Persimmilus needs to be released first. If you're getting a shipment of biocontrol agents, Persimmilus needs to go out first, because they have no food source in there. And once they start to starve down, they don't recover, and also males will start to cannibalize other males. So you always want to get these out first thing. And what's great about them is they are so hungry, they're so aggressive that they go right in and they'll attack your spider mites. Well, back to BioBee, and BioBee just happens to have a lot of cool stuff coming out this year. They have a new product called Percy Plus. What they've done here is, traditionally, Persimmilus is raised on two-spot spider mites. this is actually raised on a dust mite egg so that they don't have to raise all these 2-spots to rear them. It's a similar, and I'm giving you some air quotes there, system to how they raise cucamaras and Swarovski out there. What's interesting is that when the Persimmillas feed on these dust mite eggs, they're not red. If you look in the top left, that image up there is actually a Persimmillas. And it's really freaky when you open the bottle and see them for the first time, because you're like, whoa, those aren't Persimmillas, because the coloration's not right. But I need to take a lesson from my own lectures where I always preach you can't ID by color, and this is a good example of that. When they do start to feed on 2-spots, they do get their reddish color, and then they start to look normal. I think it'll be interesting to see if growers can use this as kind of like a scouting tool, because if you release Percy Plus and they're all white to, well, white, let's say yellowishy cream, and then you start finding red Persimmillas, that means they found 2-spots out there in your crop and are feeding on them. They do come in several size bottles. The other thing that's different about these is not only are you getting adult Persimmillas, you're getting eggs, juveniles, and adults. So you're getting all the different life stages in there, and there's food in the bottle for them. Now, I've been tinkering with these here at my house on my COVID vacation. I grew spider mites here in my guest bedroom under grow lights, and what my initial, very quick, non-scientific observation is when you put these mites out, since they're pre-fed, they don't tend to be as initially aggressive. Because, hey, I just ate a big meal on the bottle. I am not in a hurry to go hunt down spider mites, where the traditional product is, oh my gosh, we have to eat or we're going to die. So I think if you do have any kind of 2-spot problem already out, you would definitely want to go maybe with the traditional Persimmillas, because they're going to be super aggressive. If you're doing this as a preventative, this might be a better way to go, because you're getting younger mites in there and they're pre-fed, so they can live longer trying to search and look for food. You know, we're going to see more as the year goes on, as more growers trial this, but I think there's going to be room in the market for both of these kinds of products, traditional and this new rearing method, depending on your pest pressures and how you're growing. So the other thing is they've taken this technology and they put them in sachets. So they're not like your cucamaras and Swarovski sachets, which are considered a breeding system. What this is basically you have a sachet with a bunch of these Persimmillas in there that you can hang, and the Persimmillas find their way out of the hole for about 5 days. Then there is what they consider the classic. My guess is that it has dust mite eggs in there. I've got some sachets I'm going to tear apart and look. But that way, you know, they're feeding on the dust mites in the dust mite eggs in the sachet, and that allows for them to come out over, you know, about a 2-week period. So it's still not going to provide you the 4 to 6 weeks like they get with cucamaras, Swarovski, and those kinds of breeding systems, but it can give you a bit longer. You have to evaluate if this is right for your situation, or just over-top applications of loose product is better. I know there's been interest in the cannabis industry because of not wanting carrier on the product. You know, and if you're growing a plant that has any kind of trichomes on it, that can, you know, a hairy plant where the carrier can stick, this might be a better option for you. But you're going to have to evaluate your situation. These aren't for everybody. And working with somebody that, you know, has a history of understanding these different release systems can help guide you on which is going to be right, not only for a pest management standpoint, but also a financial standpoint, to see if the economics make sense of using these sachets for your system. So we also have a Newish banker plant system, and these are from IPM Labs, from Carol Glenister up in New York. And basically, these are for the parasitoid Aphidius urvi. So traditionally, the banker plants we have been using is we put a barley plant out with bird cherry oat aphid on it. And this is really targeting for the smaller aphid species like cotton melon and green peach. The problem has happened that people rely on this system and then they forget about their larger aphids, and then they have an explosion of like potato aphids. They thought they were controlling their aphids by using this banker plant, but this banker plant program with the bird cherry oat aphid is only targeted for a certain group. How these banker plants work is you have the banker plants, and here on the left you can see some barley plants, and sometimes people use oats. There's actually a paper out there that tested all the different grains to see which works best. Barley was the most reproductive for bird cherry aphids to be on, in the sense that they have the most babies, but barley can fall over and then the aphids can get trapped. So you have to look and see what's right for you. Down here he's got alyssum, and he also has the pepper plants down here. But what happens is you put these plants out and you've released parasitoids on them. And when the parasitoids emerge, they're like, man, let's go down and look in this crop. And they'll look all over here for aphids. Well, if they don't find any aphids in the past, what would happen is the parasitoids would die. Well, in this situation, what they do is the parasitoids can fly back up, find more aphids in the banker plant and reproduce, and then create more offspring to go back into the crop. So it can go back and forth this way. And so you can maintain a population. If you don't have the banker plant systems, you've got to be releasing parasitoids every week to 2 weeks to keep enough of a population out here. And there's some real great studies from Canada showing that the parasitoids that come off these banker plants are a lot healthier than the parasitoids that just come out of the bottle. I'm not saying that commercially produced parasitoids are bad, but it is a stressful situation. You know, you're hanging out on a plant, you get knocked off, you get put in a bottle, you get shipped across the country. So it's a good starter to get these parasitoids going, but then you can produce a healthier population on these plants. So this is a basic chart, and this is just a very rough overview, but basically right now we've got the barley plant, which you have the bird cherry oat aphid on, and you use the parasitoids Aphidius colemanni really on this. And again, this is targeting your smaller aphids like your cotton melon aphid and your green peach aphid. The flip side of this is the fava bean plant. This is the new system from Carol at IPM Labs, where you use a pea aphid, and on that, you're using Aphidius urvi. This is a larger parasitoid, and it tends to target the larger aphids out there, like your potato and foxglove. So when you order them, she sells you basically aphids by the gram. You want to make sure your plants are ready when they come. She's not going to ship you a whole plant this time. You're just going to get the aphids in a container. You have to be really ready for this, because let me tell you, pea aphids are incredible, how fast they can reproduce. They're one of my top-ish kind of aphids that I really like. Right now I'm in love with the cannabis aphid. Pea aphids up there too, because they have these really beautiful, long, sexy legs. So you get your aphids introduced on to your fava beans, or some of my growers have been using peas and trying other kinds of plants, but fava beans are what are suggested. And then you have to keep continually planting more fava beans, because again, these aphids are going to overtake your plants. You do have to be very careful moving these, as one of my growers has found out. You touch the plant, they just kind of fall off. So she actually put like a swooping collar around her plant, so if they drop, they'd slide into the soil and they could walk back up. So you don't want to do too much movement with these plants. You don't want to knock the plants. As of now, they're not going to attack grasses. It's going to stick to like favas, lupines, and sweet peas. But should be okay for most of our floriculture crops. You know, yes, we may find a surprise down the road, but you could look up any of these aphid species and you can find a host list of these aphids and then see if any of the crops are growing. But generally, spring bedding plants, you're going to be okay with this, and for mums if you did want to do this later in the season. So this is how you get them. This is a container with your aphids in there. They quickly, as you can see on the right, establish on the plants. And then the Aphidius urvi moves in and starts parasitizing them. You can see the mummies there. Over on the pot on the right, you can see that they're actually even now cruising up and down the pot because they are so prolific producers out there. And then again, the idea is to have the plants out in your cropping area, and the parasitoids can go back and forth. Now, there's been discussion, I've heard, that you cannot use the Colmani banker plant system and the Urvi banker plant system in the same system. Well, we're doing that at this facility, and I mean, there's only a few growers that have initially been testing this. And so we're still in the trial and testing phase of this to see how it's going to really work in production. But I think as long as the banker plants are spaced far enough apart, you know, it should work out. But time will tell, and we'll see how this is going to go. Now, the other benefit to having these banker plants with insane numbers of aphids in there is you can get a lot of other native beneficials moving in. Surfeit fly larva is a very good example. You can see on the right a surfeit fly grabbing an aphid and feeding on it. Sometimes surfeit flies and ladybirds can be a little frustrating because they can come in and strip your banker plant so fast and eat all your aphids up. But at the same time, if you can get them to adults, then they're going to go into your crop and lay eggs and help control your pests. If you're not familiar with surfeit flies, please get yourself familiar to what the adults look like. They're also called flower flies. I've had over the year a handful of growers contact me with photos like the one on the left saying, we've got caterpillars, what do I spray? People mistake these for small caterpillars. So make sure you learn to recognize what they look like, what their pupa look like. I actually just found some pupa on a flower pot in my yard yesterday. So it's good to be able to recognize the entire life cycle and have these guys in there helping you out in your program. The next thing I want to talk about is, and I know this isn't like a biocontrol product, so it's no secret, again, I've been working in hemp and cannabis a lot, and they just do not have the spray products that commercial ornamental growers do. So we've really had to focus a lot on sanitation. And with that, I absolutely love this little Dram pump up sprayer because it makes it into a foam. And why is this important? Because if you've had aphid issues or other soft-bodied insects and you take the plants out and they're still cruising around on your benches or an area, they make large foamers, but I like this because you can just pump this thing up and target an area with just like a soap to help clean the area. The idea initially is more for disease and algae removal and that kind of sanitation. But I think being able to come in and spray down with the soap on benches and areas to kill any remaining soft-bodied insects on there is a great sanitation practice. And we're doing this a lot, again, in cannabis and hemp. And it's something that is kind of missed in ornamentals. So it's something you might want to think about. For smaller growers, this smaller sprayer works, but there are large foamers too. I do know BioSafe system also has a large foamer, but these can be really good in disease prevention as well as stopping insects from spreading to your crop when you put them right back in. So some information on Bioline. Bioline's had a lot of changes through the years, but Bioline has purchased Dutch, which is in Kenya. So now Bioline has production facilities in 8 places in the world. So they're greatly expanding. They've actually opened up some more production in California too, which is interesting. One of their newer things is a trichogramma release card. Caterpillars typically aren't a massive issue on the indoor greenhouse, but with more resistance developing, with more resistance happening to the BT sprays, it's just another option to be aware of. So what's interesting about these cards, if you look at the middle picture, you can see there's channels in them, and inside of there are dead caterpillar eggs with the trichogramma parasite inside of it. What's interesting about this is they put different aged trichogramma in there, so these cards don't all release at once. You get a release over time. So it's kind of like a slow release trichogramma system. And again, trichogramma is an egg parasitoid, but for caterpillars. So once you have caterpillars, it's too late. This is a preventative, and the trichogramma will fly around and find those eggs and parasitize them. On the right, these little, almost like flying saucer looking discs, these also have trichogramma in them, and you can actually drop them in on the tops of your pots, and again, the trichogramma will merge out of that. I've actually seen some videos from France where they've been testing going out and dropping these in cornfields, and for the trichogramma to control the caterpillar eggs in corn production because of limited options for management in that system. The other thing that Bioline is really pushing this year is they've developed a different rearing system for Swarovski over what the other producers use. They're not going to give you exact specifics, but they're telling you that their product improves the quality of the product. And so this is why when people, you know, like, okay, I want to buy Swarovski, who's got the cheapest? Swarovski is not always Swarovski, it's not always Swarovski. And you may want to try it from different suppliers to see which works best in your system, because not all Swarovski are produced the same. Just how we were talking before about Persimilas, they're not produced the same either. So one might work better in your system. So if Swarovski is not performing necessarily from one supplier, you may try a different one, because again, they are being produced differently. Another interesting product that this was actually going to be launched at Cultivate last year, but because we didn't have Cultivate last year, they couldn't. So this is still, I consider, kind of in the newer category. Velifer from Basf. It's a Bavaria Basiana strain. It's strain PPRI 5339, which is a different strain that's in what's Bioceres. It's a different strain than what's in Botanigard. You know, people ask me all the time, which one's the best? Which one works best in your system for your target pest? So sometimes you may want to try these different products and see what's going to work best in your system. They are really focusing on aphids and whiteflies and thrips with this product. There's been some discussion of mealybugs. I still don't think Bavaria Basiana is a great product necessarily for mealybugs, but definitely for whiteflies and definitely thrips. It's an incredible part of the program. So basically, if you're not familiar with Bavaria Basiana, it's a fungus that kills insects. I call it kind of like athlete's foot for bugs. That's fatal. And again, you're going to find on the market there are different strains. And so that's why you may want to trial different products. And there's even different formulations. You can get liquid ES formulations. You can get wet oil powder formulations. And again, you've got to see what's going to work in your system. That's nothing too exciting. It does have, you know, a post-harvest interval, which is pretty low. And this is a liquid formulation that has an oil carrier. But so far, I've not had phyto issues with it when growers use it properly. So you just want to make sure you follow the application rate. You know, you might want to start on the lower rate and trial it on your crop to make sure you don't have any phyto issues. It is for greenhouse only. This is not for outdoor production at this time. So one thing great about this, and this is why, you know, I'm happy BASF did this, and the Bavaria Basiana is a biocontrol, but also because of this. So BASF is actually testing the product with compatibility for biocontrol agents. If you contact your BASF rep, they can get you more in-depth information. But you know, they wanted to show here that Cucumber, Swarovski, and Persimilis, this is a product that you can use right in with your program, and it's very compatible with the systems that we're often doing. Now, some of these biocontrol agents are not available in the US because obviously this testing was done in Europe, but I want to give them, you know, a good high five for them being proactive and testing their product for compatibility with biocontrol agents, where traditionally in the past, pesticide companies brought products to market, and then the onus was on the biocontrol companies to pay for the testing. And I'm very pleased to see chemical companies stepping up and doing the compatibility testing for their growers, because the growers want this information, and growers asking for it has helped you guys get this information. So Bavaria, Basiana, and Millet. Okay, we're going to talk about, this is super, super interesting information that I was kind of like, what? When I got this paper, my friend Julie sent it to me because we all, the bug nerds, share all this information around. And I had heard about them doing work with Millet and Bavaria, Basiana for looking at things like shore flies. But this is this paper that recently came out, basically looking at millet in combination with Bavaria Basiana in the soil, and what does it do for Western flower thrips pupa in the soil. This is work done up at the University of Vermont, and the basic take-home message is that they oven dried millet. And then they combined it with Botanigard, and then they treated the pots. And what they found is when they combined the millet with the Botanigard in the soil, that the spore concentrations of the Botanigard were 3 to 4 times greater than what they were earlier. So basically the millet is feeding the Bavaria to produce more spores. And what they did then is they started looking at Western flower thrips emergence out of the soil, because the pupa's in the soil. And what they found is when you have this millet in the soil, the Botanigard, you get way fewer Western flower thrips adults emerging, because the Bavaria is killing the thrips pupa in the soil. So it's a really interesting way. I mean, it's essentially millet's a banker plant for Bavaria, is the best analogy I can give you. You can see this chart here. GHA, that is the strain of Bavaria Basiana, that's a Botanigard. So when they mix the GHA with the millet, and then in the middle, it's GHA as a drench over the top, but millet was in the soil, and then the control. And you can see by pre-combining them that the Western flower thrips that emerged, because when the Western flower thrips come out of the soil, if they stick on the sticky card, they emerged, was significantly lower. So I think there's something here to kind of look at. I mean, growers know, do not go out and start mixing millet into your media. But I think down the road, there may be a way to find a way to use this information so that we can combat soil pests better by having the millet as a food source for the Bavaria Basiana. I don't know if millet in the soil is going to mess up other nutrition. Is it also going to feed plant pathogens? I mean, there's lots of things to think about here, but I think it's really interesting to see that they're thinking about this kind of research and the potential for this there. So that leads me into non-registered microbial products. This has been super scary, but yet very interesting for me. I'm starting to find more growers have microbial products, whether it be Bavaria, Metarhizium, Isaria, these fungi that kill insects. They have products that are not registered through the EPA. The products are either being sold as a soil inoculum. This particular barrel here, which was at a grower at the Pacific Northwest, they bought it off of Alibaba. That's a tub of Metarhizium, and on the import slip, it said that it was a cosmetic input, which I don't think we put metarhizium, an insect-killing fungus, in makeup. And, you know, there was no climate control on the shipment here, and you just don't know what's in there. When you have fungus and you plate it, you typically want to see just one species of something in there so that you know the product's pure. This is Bavaria Basiana on the left. It's nice and snowy white and beautiful is what you want to see. So I've been contacted by a grower in Vermont who asked me, she's like, hey, what's the rate for metarhizium? And my first thing was like, where'd you get metarhizium? Here in the US, it's commercially sold as Met 52 if you can find it and get it. The problem is it's been off the market for quite a while. I would say off the market, it's been unavailable for quite a while. And also, well, if she's got product, why doesn't she have rates on it? Well, she ordered it off a website, which the website looks somewhat legit. I mean, they made pesticidal claims on it, everything, but it was not an EPA registered product. So I'm like, first of all, do not spray that because you do not know what's in there. We had done this just before COVID, where I was at a grower in Oregon, and they had purchased a fungus called Hirsitella, which is for russet mites, and we had that tested, and that actually contained a human pathogen in it. So we wanted to see what was going on with this metarhizium product from Vermont. So it was sent off to a lab. This is what the plates look like when they plated it. Remember those nice pretty plates before I showed you? And metarhizium tends to have a greenish tinge to it. This was just a hot mess. This looks like, you know, a 3-year-old sneezed on it. And basically what they found, it not only had fungal product in it, had bacterial and yeast contaminants in there. All that other stuff in there that's not that nice greenish shade is everything else. And the manufacturers claimed they had this higher level in it, and it wasn't what they claimed was in there. And then of the metarhizium that was actually in there, less than 25% of it was actually viable. So let me tell you, if you buy this unregistered stuff, buyer beware. I'm mostly seeing this, obviously, from the side of the industry that's not using EPA registered products, cannabis and hemp, because a lot of them are not allowed to use EPA registered products. But it's a huge gamble, and this stuff is starting to spill over into other markets. So please, please stick with the EPA registered tested products from solid companies like BioSafe, BASF, Bioworks, those kinds of companies that have a long history of working with microbial products and can provide you a pure, safe product. Because this is really scary. I actually have 2 more samples that are going to get tested and to see what's actually in there. So another interesting thing, again, this isn't a product, but more of a tool. Bioworks has put together a super, super duper awesome laminated grower guide. Basically, contact Bioworks. They'll get you one. I'm going to zip forward they've got QR codes in there, and then each page, they've got like greenhouse tomatoes, vegetable transplants and herbs. They've got poinsettias in there. They've got floriculture crops. And what's nice about this is they actually give you a base program. They give you rates, not only in metric, but also in square foot, because this is always a back and forth thing on which rates do we use and having to do conversions. So they provide both. They talk about the key pests and application nodes and information on here too. So these are going to be super helpful. They come in a ringed binder that can be opened up, so as they create more cards, you can add them in to this piece of literature. It's a really nice piece of literature. Yes, I grabbed a stack of them at the show and they're mine. But again, if you contact your Bioworks rep, I'm sure they would be more than happy to get you one. Or if you see them at any of the conferences, I know they're going to be up at the Northeast Greenhouse Conference. I'll be up there also, and I'm sure they'll have them there. So a quick note, if you guys are familiar with Airfon, I always struggle with Erfon's last name, and I've known him for years. Vafai, Valify, Verfi, we're just going to go with Erfon. But he's a great research entomologist that's been down at Texas A&M. But this past week, we all learned that he's actually going to go work for Bioworks. This is not why I have Erfon in here, just throwing that in as a side note. The reason I have him in here is because Erfon the last couple of years has been looking at biocontrol on poinsettias. For his particular trial, he found that the cuttings actually came in pretty clean, which was good to hear. But as we know, retailers have, a zero tolerance for whiteflies in their poinsettias. And so he looked at using Swarovski and Aromaceras aramicus. Aromaceras is really the target for Bemisia whitefly, which is very common in poinsettia and greenhouse production today. You guys have all heard about the Q and B biotypes and concerns with pesticides not working. So people are looking more to using biocontrol agents. But what Erfon was looking at was rates. If he put out X amount of Swarovski on its own and then doubled it, did that work just as well as using Aromaceras and Swarovski together? Or, doubling the Aromaceras and leaving out the Swarovski, back and forth. And at the end of the day, basically what he found is that more is not better in this situation, that doubling his Swarovski did not provide the control level that using the Swarovski at the recommended rate in conjunction with the Aromaceras. So really using the two together in a program worked better than separately at doubling the rates. And so, because I always hate that answer when something's not working, hey, more is better. That's not the answer to be used there. And this proves that using the recommended rates and the two biocontrol agents in conjunctions can be very successful. Here's the table showing the different treatment. You can actually, this paper is available online if you do want to grab it. He did use a blower to apply his mites out on the plants and broadcasting them, and you can see they were spaced decently well from the beginning, because we talk about bridging and how important that is. But in this situation, when the plants are younger, they were spaced until they grew together. This is the actual paper, if you want to look at it online to get more into the nuts and bolts of it, or you can always contact Erfon. This is his new email address if you want to talk specifically to him about the research. And I think this is really critical for the poinsettia growers to be aware of. So one last thing, and this is more for outdoor, and I just put this in because it is registered for hemp, and eventually over time these will be probably coming for the ornamental crops. We do have this group of viruses, the nucleopolyhedral virus group, NPV, which there's a big interest in these because, as I mentioned before, a BT dipel is not working as well as it has in the past because of resistance issues. And so this is a completely new mode of action. The Heligen virus product is actually unlisted, so this can be used in organic production outdoors. But they're showing that where BT resistance is a problem, these NPV viruses that are very targeted for the caterpillars can be very successful. And this is something that you can use the viruses in conjunction with the parasitoids to kind of give it a 1-2 punch in there with trying to manage outdoor caterpillars. The viruses are pretty specific on which species they work on. So you do have to look that up. But again, right now, these are really not so much as for ornamentals, but hemp and outdoor vegetable production is on the label.